Were the COVID-19 lockdowns what life is supposed to be like? Does raising the age to buy a gun from 18 to 25 violate a constitutional right? Did Trump have better priorities than Biden? We'll talk about all of these takes and more on today's episode of Good Take, Bad Take. Hey friends, welcome to this episode of Good Take, Bad Take. This is the podcast where we gather takes from all across the internet. We try to make points about whether they're making good arguments or bad arguments. My name's Britt. I'm here with my co-host Donnie. And before we get started, make sure to like, share, subscribe. You can find us on Instagram at Good Take, Bad Take Pod, and on Twitter and YouTube at Good Bad Take Pod. Now, without further ado, let's get into some of these takes. Hopefully they're not tanks. The first one of our day is, this person tweets out, remember quarantine when everyone was making bread and dancing and making art and taking care of plants and just learning new useful skills? And we got a small glimpse into what life is supposed to be like. What do you think, Donnie? Did we get a glimpse into what life was supposed to be like under the COVID lockdowns?
Well, first of all, I think you did allude to this with when you said tanks there. I think there was a Freudian slip because this is a tank, a terrible, terrible take here. And shout outs to my friend Nick, I think, who was the one who shared this. And we're talking about him and Josh. So shout outs to you both. And yeah, this is a terrible take. There's so much wrong with it. But the first thing, of course, is the idea that life is supposed to be like this completely ignores and neglects the fact that you don't have things without making things. And so if you shut down the country, you can live on credit only so long before, you have to come back home and realize, no, stuff has to be made. So it's like, yeah, the government can, sort of buy people's time while they frantically print more money, but ultimately everyone is dancing around and it's a little bit of a game of musical chairs and with other people's money, and ultimately taxpayers and the average people are the ones who are going to lose. And that's how you see inflation going up and all the negative repercussions of shutting down supply lines, stopping people from work, all the price increases and just general inflation that's happened. All of this is a result of these what life was supposed to be like, quote unquote. So that's just a false premise to begin with. And the second thing is, this person is revealing their absolute and utter, and I don't love using this term, but their absolute and utter privilege to say that life was just so happy during this time. There were people who had who lost everything because of the quarantine. Even if COVID was as deadly as they say, why would this be your takeaway? Wouldn't quarantine be a horrifying time where millions were dying or whatever? Like, in no world, either the real world or the fantasy world, where COVID is this most awful, tragic disease that ravaged the country. And it is tragic when people died from it, don't get me wrong, but just not nearly in the amount. It was not nearly the pandemic the media claimed. But if it was, then this is a bad take. And if it wasn't, as it was, and you shut down everything for nothing, this is also a bad take. So there's no world in which this take is a good one.
Yeah, it's the word that really gets to me is what life is supposed to be like.
Yeah.
And that, I like you're saying, it really reveals the privilege, because this person thinks that life, that word in this context, and then the word useful skills cannot exist in the same sentence, right? Because this person, whether it's a he or she, they're basically they're saying like, oh, well, life is supposed to be me doing things that I like to do, regardless of whether it has any return or not on it. And yeah, maybe in a vacuum of a world where we don't require food, shelter, heating, clothing, water, any of that stuff, then yeah, that's provided all at once. And then maybe you can like not worry about that and maybe make art, but you're going to be at the mercy of whatever like lifestyle is allowed to you, and just granted to you. And so it's like this person just has this like idea that like, oh yeah, like life is supposed to be that food just shows up and that the water just turns on and that my house just has electricity running to it and it just all goes and everyone can take a break and everyone could do that at all times. These people forget even the government had to say, oh, there's essential things, right? Like there are things that, and when they say essential, I think any job that supports you and your family is essential. But even they acknowledge when they say essential that there are needs that literally cannot go unattended to, or else all of society completely and utterly breaks. the government just settled for completely and utterly breaking it for only a small section of people, right? I'm not even a
Right.
small section, a lot of people. But any business owner that wasn't maintaining those things, they said, hey, you're not essential, and you can go by the wayside. So now you're saying very privileged, very bad take, very naive. Like this person. If you want to know what life is supposed to be like, and by supposed to be meaning its base state without all of this capitalism and things like that, like we could just go drop you in the middle of the jungle, and that's what life is supposed to be like. And it is not fun, and you are probably going to be eaten.
Yeah, the other the other thing that makes me laugh is and just learning new useful skills. And we got a glimpse. I mean, ideally, isn't that kind of what education
Yeah,
should be about?
I do that without the quarantine. So
Yeah, right. I know it's people act as though I mean, first, like, shouldn't our modern educations, especially public schools, be teaching useful skills and things like that? And so it's kind of weird that this is like a snap and like, wow, this is a new experience for me because you should be learning those. And if not, what an indictment on the public education system. Pro tip, that's where I land. But second, yeah, like you said, there's nothing stopping you from learning new useful skills now. It just means you have to, sacrifice some of your other time to do that. And it's about competing and trading priorities. And instead of, and now that you've opened up all this free time because of the quarantine, you're trading, creating value and working and actually moving the economy with learning things. And frankly, that's a good use of that quarantine time. Th- you know, there there's a way to say that during the quarantine, I was able to take advantage of the bad situation and do really productive or good things. Like I got to know a lot of people online really well. We had a gathering of people who were freed up because they wouldn't have been able to otherwise. They're supposed to be locked down. They flew out to Washington and we had a great time. That was awesome. And that wouldn't have been possible without it. But I also think it's totally callous and incorrect to say, "Oh, quarantine was so great because that got to happen." It's like, no. It's like it was great that that happened, but the quarantine still sucked. There were still lives were ruined, and you have to think about like a net balance for all this kind of thing before you start talking about, "Oh, this is what life is supposed to be like. This was just so great," because that just really irritates me.
yeah, agree with you there. All right, moving on to our next one. We got a tweet by Zuby, and Zuby writes, I'm fairly convinced that if you, quote, leveled the playing field and gave everybody $25,000 to start, then within 5 years, most of the people who are currently rich would be rich again, and those who are currently broke would be broke again. Not all, but most. What do you think? Is he right?
I think this is a fantastic take. Not only is this kind of a what's the I can't, it's not a priori or anything, but not only is it an understandable take just kind of from logic and rationality without like the evidence or proof, but you actually have some evidence to back up this claim when you look at people who come into wealth easy through things like the lotto or other kinds of gambling. Those are the people who are the least likely to hold on to it, and the people who, even if they come from a lower start and an impoverished backgrounds, the people who work hard and save, they're the ones who keep increasing that wealth. They start over. And that's why you can see people who, maybe they started a successful business, lost everything, and then they build their way back, right? Because so much about how you acquire wealth and how you hold on to wealth has to do with your habits, has to do with your discipline, has to do with those kinds of things, not just the initial opportunity. Now, to say that there's no role for initial opportunity is naive. Obviously, your starting point matters, but it's one of those things where n- if you're the kind of person who is going to lose money, it doesn't matter if you start with $5,000 or $500,000, you're always going to end up broke. And if you're the kind of person who's responsible with money, you can start with 50,000 and that's going to make it a lot easier. But even if you start with 5,000, you're going to be able to build up and increase and be responsible, not live outside of your means and that kind of thing. And I think that is very true and a correct good take from Zuby here.
Yeah, it's really good. I His time horizon seems a little short, because I think
Yeah.
a lot of wealth is, and I'm being really nitpicky on it. It's a great take, but a lot of wealth is family like oriented, right? So, um, like a lot of people don't realize that, or they conflate. Like we have a lot of billionaires and people in power that leverage the government and maintain their wealth through ill-gotten gains, right? And then that people will project those bad people onto, like, say, the family that owns 2 properties, right, and rents them out or things like that. Say, "Oh, they're rich, they're awful, we need to eat them." Um, and what people don't realize is, like, that wealth that that family owns or those people own, it's been stored up over generations, right? It takes about 6 to 7 generations to reach the peak, on average of a family's wealth, generational wealth, and it takes about 3 generations to lose it, which is really, really crazy. But I think about my family and my wife's family. Both of our parents were first generation immigrants to this country. They were born someplace else and then they were brought here as kids. Their parents probably never owned a home. As my grandmother owned a home like late in life, like after the age of 40, owned a home. Um, and then my parents and my wife's parents were able to own a home probably in their early 30s, mid 30s and stuff. But that wealth, as they've made good decisions and carried that forward, now like each generation gets progressively richer and richer, and as long as each generation makes good decisions with that money, like it is maintained, right? Instead of blowing the inheritance, putting it into assets and things that actually generate more value and more revenue, and maintain its value. That's how you build wealth, and that's how you get families that own a lot of things. And it seems like it just happened, but it really was a plan of sacrifice and foresight, that has taken decades to make happen. And so, I mean, the same concept applies to Zuby's deal, right? It's like the same people who are going to be rich with, like you were saying, $500 are the same people who are going to be rich with $500,000, and vice versa. But I would just make the point that's like, yeah, it's like you have a duty to reverse. If your family has been poor, if you're on the downward cycle of peak of family wealth and you're generation 2 or 3 of losing that wealth or whatever, maybe you're the generation right after generation 3. It's like your duty to decide, hey, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm going to reverse this and make good decisions. I'm going to have a longer time horizon in my head than just what is immediately in front of me. I'm going to try and not only pay for the generations in the past, but also try and put a little bit away for the generations of the future. And then, as well as instill that type of mindset into your kids and the people that come after you. And then what's crazy is like you might not see it, but 2 generations, 3 generations later, your family will be the ones being criticized as being, the 1% and being wealthy and all that stuff, but they'll be in a great spot. So who cares?
Yeah, yeah, no, that's exactly right. I think the other aspect of this, which you can go back and forth, is that a lot of the what's happened in those examples of hardworking immigrants, or people like that. It's there's a not necessarily culture tied with ethnicity, although sometimes that's the case. But even just as an immigrant, there's immigrant culture that passes that kind of knowledge on. And so there's a financial literacy, or maybe not even financial literacy in the sense that it's often used with, like, knowing how the market works, or being able to make wise investments, but just a financial literacy in a sense of not living outside your means, not using credit cards to a ridiculous degree. Just a general knowledge there that gets passed on and taught, that is lacking from schooling and lacking from a lot of families. And that's where a lot of that is going to come from, because you have to be taught to be responsible. It's easy to spend more than you have. It's easy to spend on things you want but don't need. It's hard to be taught how to make the wise choice, how to make the delayed gratification type choice. Those things have to be instructed and taught. So, another indictment on the education system that should be doing a better job of that. Also, American families probably should be doing better.
Agree with you there. All right, moving on to our next one. We've got AOC tweeting out about the CNN town hall with Trump. For those of you who haven't heard about it, CNN did a nice little town hall with Trump, and it was everything that you would expect. It was actually somewhat vintage Trump when I watched it. I really enjoyed it for its entertainment value. But as the all the casuals would like to say, no one won, but Americans lost. That whole thing. Just kidding. I think Americans won because it was just so entertaining. But AOC has a different viewpoint on that, and she writes, CNN should be ashamed of themselves. They have lost total control of this quote town hall to again be manipulated into platform election disinformation, defenses of January 6th, and a public attack on a sexual abuse victim. The audience is cheering him on and laughing at the host. This falls squarely on CNN. Everyone here saw exactly what was going to happen. Instead, they put a sexual abuse victim in harm's way for views. This was a choice to platform lies about the election on January 6th with no plan but to have their moderator interrupted without consequence. I know you haven't watched it yet, but what do you think of this take on it?
Well, it is crazy how crystal clear she is making it that freedom of speech is not a value that she supports, that the average person, the average citizen at a quote unquote town hall is nothing more than a prop or a rube who should not be able to express their opinion or view. And if they don't agree with whatever the current thought is with her, they're disgusting and vile. And uh I mean, it's just amazing how broadly speaking, she's just saying, I mean, it's not even the quiet part these days anymore, but she's just outing this view so broadly. I mean, how much more obvious could you say than, to say the town hall sucked because someone I disagree with got to, voice their opinion and people cheered them. People liked what he had to say. That is, I mean, that's elitism in the worst way, right? Not in sort of maybe the impressive way. Elitism in the sense that if you don't agree with me, then you're wrong no matter what, and your voice doesn't deserve to be heard. Freedom of speech shouldn't apply, and blah blah blah. I mean, this is a crazy. I think unfortunately very much shared by a lot of people these days, but it's pretty crazy when you think about it in terms of this is someone who is purported to uphold the Constitution, and one of the principles of the Constitution is free speech. One of the purported uh, ideas of our government is that it's the people who are supposed to be in charge and in power, and both of these ideas are totally denigrated in this take. It's pretty crazy.
Uh, what's really annoying to me about it, and again, I know you haven't watched it, so you just have to take my word for it. But the town hall was like a town hall is supposed to be the town
Yeah,
asking questions of the president, or the I guess the person of Donald Trump, um, and instead it was more like a debate between him and I can't remember the lady's name, Caitlin something. Uh,
yeah,
like she was literally like if she was a presidential candidate in the like the I want to say the prelims because I'm thinking about UFC, but you know what I'm talking
the
about, like
primaries.
the primaries. There you go. Um, prelims way more entertaining than the primaries, but in some cases, but it honestly was like she was like another candidate in the primaries, just like pushing back, constantly trying to interrupt him. It's like and AOC's trying to say, "Oh, CNN let Donald Trump interrupt her." It's like, well, dude, like you invited him for this town hall. The purpose of the town hall is for the town to ask presidents or ask questions of the president, and then more time was spent by the moderator, who's supposed to be moderating between the two, pushing back and saying things. And she was wrong on a lot of stuff. There was a kind of a whole segment on the Presidential Records Act and things like that, and she just didn't know what she was talking about. And then on top of that, Trump was legitimately funny like it's some of these things. That's one of the many redeeming qualities amongst him, just making the establishment look silly and enraging them. But he's just genuinely pretty funny. Pretty, he almost has like a stand up routine with some of this stuff. And she she has something like she's like, why did you not support people challenging the debt ceiling when you were president, and then now you're like supporting them, refusing to raise the debt ceiling that you're not president. And he's like, well, it's because I'm not president anymore. And it was like really funny, and everyone laughed about it. Like it was so honest and as much as everyone doesn't like me saying this about him, but it was truthful, right? He was being truthful. Nasty person, and at least kind of shows what the it shows what the politics and the game of all this stuff is, and that's truthful and awesome in its own way. So I don't know. AOC, I mean, she is disingenuous and she knows that all these things. I mean, her whole spiel about like she felt threatened on January 6th when the timeline doesn't match up with her version of the events. So she was like, "Oh yeah, they came banging on my door asking where is she?" And I hid in the bathroom, and she's like, "Oh yeah, but it was actually a cop or whatever." But it's like you didn't. She didn't actually know the Capitol had been breached at that point
Yeah.
because it hadn't been. It hadn't been. It was like 3 hours before the Capitol had been breached, and it was in another building. So, if of all the liars out there, I mean, it touches every single point that she makes here.
Yeah. Yeah. It's You're right, and I think that that's probably why there is such a visceral reaction from this tweet, because this was tweeted live during the event, and the fact that Donald Trump can come off as likable in that is probably terribly frightening for them, right?
Yeah.
Because I think, you know, it's it's not the only metric, obviously, and there's so much more that goes into this, than just likability. But when you think about the 2016 election and the 2020 election, like, Donald Trump had a huge laugh factor that just wasn't there in 2020. Like, you think about all the memes that come from President Trump, almost all of them are
Yeah.
still from 2016.
That's a good point.
um and again, obviously, that there's more to the election than just that, but I think if they're realizing, if he can get back into that really likable place and people, forget, that's a huge detriment to them. It's not the only thing, obviously, but it could be pretty harmful for their chances back. So that's probably some of the reaction. And I think the more angry and the more visceral, and I don't know what the other phrase here would be, but I think the more you get that kind of reaction out of people, the more transparent they are about their disdain for the average person and for the average person's rights, which I think is embodied in this take here.
Absolutely. All right, moving on to our next one. We've got Brad Palumbo, who we've had on this show before at Cringe Post, but he's quote retweeting Congressman Jared Moskowitz. And the congressman tweets out, after the shooting at my high school in Parkland, I successfully helped raise the age to buy a gun in Florida. Now I'm filing a bill in Congress to raise the age to buy a semi-automatic firearm from 18 to 25. We no longer need moments of silence. We need moments of action. How cheeky of a little catchphrase there. And Brad Palumbo quote retweets this saying, next up, a bill to raise the age at which you receive free speech rights to 26. Also a bill allowing conviction without a jury for those under 30. See the problem? Adult Americans are entitled to their constitutional rights, and you have no right to strip them by age. I'm assuming you want to go through Brad's take on this.
Yes. Yep.
All right.
This is a good take from Brad. I think he's laying out more of a pragmatic kind of argument for this than I would go. I would just argue from the first rights, like, no, you don't have the right to deny someone uh access to self-defense as soon as they're, if you're going to operate within a framework of someone being considered an adult, then they have that right. That's that. But I think that he's, he kind of lays out the alleged or the very real possibility of slippery slope at this point. um and I think he does so correctly, because there really isn't anything that distinguishes this constitutional right from the other constitutional rights that he lists, right? There's no, you can make the arguments that, oh, qualitatively having a gun is different than being able to have free speech. But really, you and I both know that, one, legally there isn't a difference between those two things constitutionally speaking. You have the right to them, absolutely, both. Second, we also know that depending on the mechanisms of the government, they will absolutely argue, when it helps them, that free speech rights are just as dangerous as gun rights
Yes.
are. You can incite people who have guns. So you yourself may not have a gun, but if you have a big enough following and you're under the age of 26, you can incite people to carry out actions of violence against you. And that's why, we have the movement there. Or even, the other example he gives, conviction without a jury trial. Well, he was 27, and he's a maniac, and we don't really think that this kind of person deserves that. Like, they're too dangerous for society, whether or not, they're justly accused or not. So I think his take here is right, and I think that he outlines kind of the down the road look. The more and more our government on both local and federal levels grows in power, the more realistic these kind of hypotheticals that he lists are, I think.
I wonder what the congressman's like reasoning from 18 to 25 is. Like, I'm assuming
Yeah.
probably some like brain development thing, or is it just like oh yeah, we're going to make it hard. Like here in Washington state, we just had HB 1240 pass, which is basically bans all semi-automatic rifles as well as all of the parts associated with them, right? So it's a really clever way of making it so that yeah, everyone can keep their gun that they already have, but if it breaks, well, too bad, you're not able to fix it. And also, in a couple generations, hypothetically, no one will have any guns, right? Because stuff gets broken. And one of the unintended side effects, or maybe intended side effects of this, is that people are going to be less likely to go use their guns in practice, right? To actually train with them and things like that. So I'm assuming this is like raise it from 18 to 25. Maybe someone that is in the household of someone that's fairly based. By the time they get to 25, they get their chance to kind of work on them at college and things to ideologically align them with themselves and things like that. That's me reading into it. But regardless, I think your point still stands. Outside of all that, it's like, yeah, there is and Brad's point of further the take we're actually critiquing, it's a great take. It's right. I agree that it's a little pragmatic because I would just say like, hey, like it doesn't. I would argue from the standpoint that you have an unalienable rights once you can provide consent on those, and maybe the age of like when someone is considered an adult to make those decisions can kind of shift back and forth. But we've decided, and I think it's fairly reasonable. It's somewhere after the age of 18, right?
Yep.
Or about 18, or maybe slightly before, depending on where you're at and the type of culture in and stuff like that. And because of that, like, yeah, you're an adult. You have inalienable rights. They are a priori, and it's wrong of anyone to try and take those away for any reason. And if there are consequences about you having those rights, it's not an issue with the fact that you have those rights. It's an issue with something that we're doing as society. So the change has to come from someplace else because the right in and of itself needs to be maintained, or else you're going to have something worse come off. And it just it. I was just talking with someone about this the other day about how they selectively will decide at what age you are responsible enough to handle certain things. And case in point, if you're 18 and you go into a bank and you say, "Hey, I've got this really amazing idea to start a painting business. Can you give me $120,000 to do it? I need to buy a van and buy supplies and pay for a little bit of marketing." You're going to get laughed out of there. There's no way in heck you're going to be able to get that loan. But if you go and you apply online for a student loan for $160,000 for 4 years for a degree that might not have any return, that you have no experience in, that you have no business maybe even getting, it might not even have a track record of you getting a job, but they'll loan it to you easily. Like they'll just give it to you online. You fill out a FAFSA and you do it, and they'll just give it to you. Somehow, like all the incentives are kind of wonky. And then once you start looking at who actually benefits from these things, it suddenly becomes clear. And I think with the firearm stuff and the rights, like it benefits the state to strip those away because, at least in states and in countries that had firearms, they were not able to put as many COVID restrictions in because it was obvious, right? It's like we can push so far up until the point that there's violent revolt because we have 700 million guns in this country. And if those 700 million guns get turned on us, if we can't even handle the Taliban, and in Afghanistan, there's no way we're going to be able to handle 700 million gun owners in the United States. So that's their motivation. They're trying to play a little bit of a long game here. They're hoping over the course of the next few generations, they'll be able to take them away. But I think they're going to fail.
Yep. No, I think that's right. The bottom line for people who maybe are hesitant on gun things in general and are just generally more, like, well, I'm okay with that because it's guns. Just remember that when it comes to every single aspect of the government, they are always more prone to taking away rights than they are to
Mm,
giving them back. And even if you yourself are personally, hesitant or scared or cautious when it comes to guns and gun ownership, you have to recognize that the government has been so abysmal at keeping bad things out of the hands of bad people, even when they want. Look at the war on drugs. Look at the TSA's failure rate. Look at all of the ways in which they suck at actually preventing, negligent or harmful people from acquiring these things, even when they impose those burdens on regular people, and then recognize that those rights aren't ever going to come back to the people who will use them responsibly. And this will just continue to encroach. So if you allow one area, even if it's an area you're not super thrilled about, like guns or drugs or whatever, if you allow the government the power to creep in your right to access these things, that's not a self-contained thing. The government doesn't operate in silos. It is, a corporate monster, but with the biggest private industries that are in bed with the government officials. They are all working together to enclose as much power as they can. So you let them in one area, like guns, and they're going to come into the next one.
Mm.
Speech. They're going to come to the next one. Your right to a trial. They're coming to the next one. Your civil liberties. Your privacy. All that. It's all connected, and you can't think about these issues in a one-off case. And that's one of the fundamental flaws, I think, with people who consider themselves maybe independent or moderates or whatever, is I feel like they kind of operate in this basis where they think that, well, I'm a moderate on this, I'm conservative on that, I'm liberal on that, but you have to recognize that it's all the same beast. There isn't this granularity. You can't just pick and choose issues about the government that you like and dislike, because it's the same leviathan. It's like, looking at a gorgon
Mm.
or some kind of monster, and saying, well, I'll let that head live, but I'm going to cut off and kill this one. And it's like, it's going to come back, and it's going to come back stronger in all the areas, if you let sort of one area of the rot remain.
Yeah, yeah, that's a really great point. We have this thing in our band called the fishbowl principle, which is it depending on how long we give ourselves to set up, we will always take up the entire amount. And
Yeah.
so if we give ourselves an hour to set up, like we're going to take an hour, the same setup, if we give ourselves 3 hours, we'll probably take the whole 3 hours. The government is like a fishbowl because fish will grow to the size of the bowl that you put them in, right? So if you take a fish out of a small bowl and you put it in a bigger bowl, it's going to grow to the as max capacity as it can. And that's how the government is, right? So you give a little bit here, you give a little bit there. It's like it's never going to be enough. They're always going to move one more step past that, and the only time that they stop, it's all you can almost never shrink them. But the only time they ever stop is if you just say, "Yeah, we're not going to remove anything else." And then eventually, maybe it gets better with generations and stuff like that. But it's just like we talked about in the last one with the TSA. Like we just accept walking through a line, being irradiated in a in a X-ray machine, and having people grab all over the place is just normal. Where that was unthinkable 30 years ago. Like I said, I could just walk up and watch my dad fly off without any of the need for that stuff. So, but the problem is that the government is really good at this. Is one of the few things they're good at is saying, "Hey, this is what's normal. We are the experts. This is what normal. This is what you've come to accept." And the public's like, well, it's government, authorized. Therefore, they've got their stamp. Therefore, it's like the gold standard. It's the thing that we need to do and how we live it. It's like, no, that's not the case. And so things like this, things like the e-verify thing we talked about last episode, they need to be really, really opposed because they become the day-to-day living that we come to expect and the rest of the population comes to expect. And that's really terrifying.
Yep. I think
All
that's
right.
right.
Moving to our last one. We've got Melissa Tate also commenting. She's replying to Joe Biden, who was saying, "Hey, my priorities were awesome, and Trump's priorities at the town hall were just the January 6th stuff." And Melissa Tate replies, "Trump definitely has the best priorities. You have destroyed the country." And she shows a picture, line item by line item. Inflation under Joe Biden, it was 8.3%. Under Donald Trump, 1.4%. Gas under Joe Biden was $3.91. Under Trump, it was $2.31. The mortgage rate was 6.5 under Biden, 3.25 under Trump. The border was secured under Trump and open under Biden. High crime under Biden, low under Trump. There was no war under Trump, and yes, there was war under Biden. And then vaccination was voluntary under Trump, and it was forced under Biden. What do you think?
This is a terrible take. We could go down the list almost
Yep.
entirely and just pick them off one by one. The other thing before that's not even listed here, the one thing I did here that made me laugh was Trump definitely has the best priorities, like the bump stock ban and stuff like that, like
Yep.
which he defended, and
He
he
did.
totally waffled on guns in the town hall. So it's nice that that was not on this list here. Um, Gosh, I mean, we've been over this so many times, but the inflation, I mean, when you talk about inflation, it's a process that by its very nature takes time to put into effect. You knock over the first domino and it's going to take some time for the rest to fall. And Trump's, his stimulus bucks, his passing of the largest spending bill ever at the time, and he encouraged the Fed to mess up the economy. He did all of these things that he did led to the path that Biden has continued that has caused all of this inflation to begin with. I think the fact that Donald Trump didn't go in aggressively against the Fed and say we're going to abolish this thing, or at the very least we're going to audit this thing, shows that he has no actual interest or any priority in reducing inflation, in reducing the mechanisms that governments use to mess up the market economy, all those kinds of things. He doesn't care about that. He wants whatever is politically easy and feasible in the moment for him. And at the time, it was print a bunch of money, send it to Americans because that will make them vote for me. And so that was his priority when it came to Fed policy and inflation and stuff. And I think that kind of goes down the list here, generally speaking, as well, with gas and mortgage rates and things like that as well.
Yeah, the part that I found the most funny about this whole meme was like that she under Trump said, "Oh yeah, he under Trump inflation was 1.4% and the mortgage rate was so good it was 3.25%." And it's like yeah, one of these things led to the other, right?
Yeah.
Like you don't like like the reason we have 8.3% inflation, which is it's actually a lot more than that today, but the reason we have that is because we artificially kept interest rates low. And that's
Yep.
because Trump wanted the perception of a booming economy and all this stuff. So it was really funny that she included both of those because like to me, that is one of the bad things that Trump did during his presidency. I mean, every president kind of does it, right? So he's not unique in that way. The other aspect too, like the border wall, it's like, yeah, it was kind of secured, but you weren't able to get it through actually like you promised. Like we don't have a concrete wall that's 30 feet tall and goes down so people can't bury under it. We have it in some places, but not everywhere. So he failed on that. And then the war, right? It's like no, you say under the column, she says under war, no, under Trump. It's like, no,
No.
there was plenty of war, right? There was plenty of war under Trump. He didn't start new wars. That's what you should say. Started a new war. It's like, yeah, under Trump, that's no. Under Biden, I guess you can kind of assign Ukraine to him as well as maybe some of the stuff we're doing in Sudan and things like that. But yeah, Trump was good in that he didn't start any new wars, but he definitely continued and continues to fight them. And maybe kind of helped us get out of Afghanistan, but other than that, not that great. And then the
Well,
vaccination, dude. Oh, go for it.
well,
Go for it.
if I was going to say, if you're going to credit him with Afghanistan, Biden's the one who actually did the pullout, right?
That's fair. Yeah.
And then all of the Republicans, oh, what a botched pullout, and so it was, wait, heads I win, tails you lose, kind of
Yes.
logic.
Yep. Classic. Yep. And then the vaccination, right? Like, and I think Trump's going to get hit really hard on this, and I'm really looking forward to it. Is when they say, hey, like you're all against the COVID regime or whatever, but you kept number one and the number one enemy in there the entire time, which is Dr. Fauci. Like, how do you square that? So yeah, Trump's got a lot to answer for.
Yeah, I was gonna say that it's funny because you'll look at pro-Trump people online, and they hate the fact that DeSantis is really pushing the COVID narrative. DeSantis is all in on the lockdowns were wrong. Fauci is a criminal. All this, and all of the Trump people are like, we're past that. Let's move on. Let's look ahead. We don't want to focus on
Mm,
that. And it's because they know that Trump was really bad on that. He was
yeah.
terrible on that. It was not voluntary. If you looked at the airlines and things like that, absolutely not. The other one that we didn't talk about here is crime. And what's funny about crime is, first and foremost, crime is not really a federal issue. So crime shouldn't be in really even in this policy what to begin.
It's
Now,
just low.
yeah. And the most generous I think I would be willing to grant this interpretation is that, as far as the federal stuff goes, was the federal government as involved in prosecuting crime with like January 6 people? No, Biden has really ramped that up, which is terrible and bad, and that wasn't quite as much a thing during the Trump administration. But generally speaking, that's more state policy. But even if you want to look at the broad swaths, yes, there have been terrible looting, terrible crime that's happened in like places like Chicago, recently. And also, like, what about the Black Lives Matter protests? I feel like that was a pretty bad crime rate, and that was during Trump's presidency, if I recall correctly. I think that was during 2020, before he was out of office there. So you saying in a broad stroke like crime was low, it's like I don't know. There were some of the biggest, violent, riotous acts in a long time during the Black Lives Matter riots. So I don't really get how you can credit Trump with low crime and then fault Biden with high crime when in many cases it's kind of equitable and not really in either of their wheelhouses.
Yeah, and this is just case in point that these guys are all the same, right? They all get in there, and the reason they're all the same, I mean, I guess you can make an argument that like the position attracts the same type of evil people, but I think it's probably more symptomatic of like the incentives for both the administrative state as well as once the president gets in there are all the same, right? Regardless of whether you are red or blue or any of that stuff. Trump kind of doesn't fit the mold in some ways because there are some things he was different on, but in general, these people want to preserve their power, so they keep interest rates low, right? They want to make the appearance that the economy is going great, so they do that, and they're incentivized to lie to you. I don't know. Have you listened to Peter Schiff and Jordan Peterson's interview?
No, I haven't. I
Dude,
wanted
it's
to.
fantastic. It
Yeah.
really made some of this stuff click to me, at least on like gold,
Hmm.
and like currency and stuff. And Peter did a really good job of explaining it. But he starts out with a really awesome, I mean, very Misesian kind of analysis of interest rates and why people keep them low and things like that. And I think you and I would both agree that like the even though we're at 6.5% for the mortgage rate today, it's like it should, if it was left up to the markets and the markets were actually correcting for it and correcting for it in a way to actually address inflation, you'd probably be more north of 20%, on
Yeah.
these rates because you'd have to do that to cool everything off, to make everything go back down. But Biden is still artificially keeping them low, right? And every president has that incentive. And so, yeah, it's the same with all the other stuff, right? The vaccination, like Trump wanted so badly to be able to claim that he ended the pandemic so he could get voted back in, that he authorized the Operation Warp Speed and he kept who he thought would make him look best throughout that entire process. And it bit him in the butt, but it doesn't change his motivation. And he's going to continue that motivation if he gets reelected. And he might be good on a few things, and we might get a few wins. I think the overturning of Roe v. Wade was awesome, and that was mainly due to the fact that he was able to nominate conservative judges and stuff like that. He didn't necessarily nominate the best conservative justices or anything like that, but at least we were able to get that. But yeah, it's the wins are marginal, regardless of whether it's blue or red in the White House, and it's because their incentives are structured in such a way that you lose, right? We all lose, and they want to make it's all time horizon. They want to make sure that it looks good in the near term, in the next 4 years. Anything else beyond that, be darned.
Yeah, the last thing I'll say is the candidacy of Donald Trump was very different, and the modern Republican Party, their populism is very different than the Democrats right now. But when it came down to it, Donald Trump himself was not that
Yeah.
different. He was just another suit in the office who's trying to maintain power and keep power and manipulate everything around him in order to give him the best chances of holding on to that power. So, on the one hand, I do want to acknowledge, in particular, people like Dave Smith really want to say, like, you can't just look at the two parties and say they're the exact same right now. Like, that's just not true. And I agree. But Donald Trump himself was really not that much different. The way that he campaigned was, the way that he channeled a lot of people's concerns and things was different, but ultimately I don't think he ended up being that much different in office, and unfortunately that's the case with a lot of people. I don't think that's true always, and I think on a local level the more and more that's less true. I think, like, for instance, if you live in a blue state, oftentimes electing red people is going to be much to your benefit, and oftentimes the reverse is true. But when it comes down to it, the further up in the chain of power you go, the the more it's like the kind of you die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain kind of a thing, where you
Mm.
get into that really big power and either the swamp corrupts you or you're powerless to fight it. And I don't think Trump was powerless to fight it necessarily. I think he just didn't exactly have the right incentives because ultimately
And
he
you didn't know
is
enough.
part of the swamp too. Yeah, oh
Yep.
yeah, and he didn't know enough either. Yeah.
He doesn't particularly like to learn. He's got great instinct, and that carries him pretty far. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
he's not well read.
No.
All right. If you don't have any more on this, I'm good as well.
All right.
Friends, thank you so much for hanging out with us for the show. Again, please like, share, subscribe. It helps us out a lot. And if you have any takes that you see, again, shout out to, was it Nick and Josh that sent us
Yes.
the first one? Shout out to them. If you guys see any takes, please send them to us because we love going through them. And we'll catch you on the next one.